and I will share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Let me see why it's loading so long. Let's try again.
I think Zoom typically has a problem with Keynote going full screen if that's what you're doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you may have to stay like that. If it's
Okay.
not Zoom, so Google Slides. Sometimes.
That's weird. Okay, so welcome to ProductTank Hong Kong. Maybe some of you are first timer here. So let me introduce what ProductTank is all about. So ProductTank is the world's largest product community by product people for product people. As you can see, we have a lot of footprints around the world. We have over 200 cities having ProductTank meetups. And basically it originated from meetup in London. So a group of product managers, they went to a bar and had some drinks, and they figured out why wasn't there a product manager meetup. So then they established one, and gradually the idea spread across the world, and they also formed a company called Mind the Product. So Mind the Product is a company for corporate coaching and also having a lot of online courses and also conferences as well. So they do have a lot of great product management resources that you can refer to. So you can check their website out at mindtheproduct.com. So for ProductTank, we usually want to get the product manager community involved to speak at the ProductTank, or if you have any fantastic topic to share, do come to us and see whether we can create a meetup for your topic. And you can also join the Mind the Product newsletter to learn more about all the latest development of product management. So tonight we are really honored to have Kevin from Lalamove. So he's the head of product at Lalamove, and tonight he will share about how did he scale his product team and why does it matter to product managers. So yeah, I will pass the time to Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. So I'm gonna share my screen if you can give me that access.
Okay. Can you try now?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for joining. This is also my first time doing a Zoom chat or Zoom talk, so bear with me for any, I guess, technical difficulties or whatever it may be. I think the topic that I want to talk about today is something dear to me. It's about scaling a product team and why does it matter to product managers. It's something that I had to do as the head of product at Lalamove. When I was at this role, I scaled the team from around, I think, 10 to now it's around 40, and we're expanding as well. So we're hiring more and more product managers. And this task for me has been a very difficult one, but at the same time, it's been something that I quite enjoy, and I would really like to share, my thoughts about it. It won't be that detailed, but it's more on how I believe or what do I think scaling a product team is like, and why does that actually matter to product managers as well. So just to have a quick introduction. So hi, I'm Kevin. I like to call myself a self-taught product manager, and I still like to call myself a product manager, and I can explain a little bit more. And this is also the basis of the talk as well. So I'm a self-taught product manager with experience in building and growing product teams. I currently at the head of product at Lalamove, and basically responsible for the product org and all things product, including design, product management, and UX in Lalamove. So again, for those who don't know what Lalamove is, I think there may not, we might not be, you know, that famous for a lot of places. So what Lalamove is, it's an on-demand delivery service. So essentially, if you need, if there's a delivery need wherever you may be, especially if you need it right now, you can use our applications either via API, web, or their mobile app. Place an order from point A to point B, or point A to point A, B, C, etc. And then we'll match you with the best driver or the most suitable driver that will then come and pick up your goods and deliver to where you need to go. So that's Lalamove. So I think, so I'll get into the topic right now. I like to keep things a little bit more interactive. I like to ask questions, so feel free to unmute yourselves whenever you want, and feel free to, you know, try your best to answer the questions I have. So I actually start off with one very simple question. Since we're talking about product teams, and I think one thing that we need to understand is essentially what is product management, right? So by scaling a product team or managing a product team, what do we need to know? We really know what is the objective of our product management, or what do we do? What do we do as part of the organization, right? So I think actually that's a question for all of you guys as well. You guys can try to feel free to answer it. So what do you guys think is product management? What do we do? What is product management? Does anybody have an answer or what they think product management is? It's okay, I can kickstart this. So some of them, this is actually a graph that everybody has seen. I actually don't really like it, but it's something that that's very common in the interweb. It's common where, you know, whenever you search what is product management, you see this Venn diagram between UX, tech, business, and we're stuck in the middle, right? So this is a very common way of, you know, talking about product management. I don't really like it. I can explain a little bit why later as well. This is also a, you know, just from Wikipedia, right? Product management is an organizational function within a company dealing with new product development, blah, 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 right? Okay, that's great. But you know, understanding what product management is core to scaling a product team. And the next part is another question that I actually want to ask you guys. Maybe hopefully you guys can answer what this. I'd like to hear from those who are, you know, maybe not in the industry or in the similar industry, but also call yourselves product managers, or in different companies as well. So maybe, I don't know, what do you guys think product managers do? And I know that there are some people from Lalamove and they've heard me answer this question. So what do you guys think product managers do? Oh, I think there's a chat. So Kimmy Mew says writing product specs. Yeah, that's part of what we do.
Manage people.
Manage people, yeah. So this is, I think this is all, I can't remember where I got this, but I got this from another website. Product manager sits in the intersect between business, technology, and works in the middle person between the two. Another one, this is from Coursera. So I only chose this because they're teaching product management. So I'd expect them to know what product managers do as well. So they talk about product managers stay on top of the business, consumer trends and behaviors directly or indirectly affect the product or company. And I think another very common one that a lot of people, say what a product manager does is, oh, they're the CEO of the product, right? This is something that a lot of people hear. And, to me, like there's so many different ways of describing what a product manager does. But to me, product management is very simply one thing. And but I'll pause here and I'll explain a little bit afterwards as well. So I think
Sorry, can I
the next
just answer Kevin, just a quick one. The CEO of product is quite a controversial one. If you look up this, because you're not the CEO, but I guess you're the CEO of making sure that vision is seen, heard, and lived and breathed by all those people. CEO, there's a lot of interesting talk from, like, I think the original Ben Horowitz post around CEO of product from like 2013 till now, and how that's shifted and changed. So an interesting one for a discussion for another day, but I'd love to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, and actually that's exactly right. So I also don't really like that term, being the CEO of the product, especially when you're in a scaling organization. That becomes less and less true. But yes, so that's definitely true. So I think, so I'll move forward now. So I think another question I'd like to ask you guys is, hey, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are in a product team right now, or those who are. What would you change about your current team, right? And these are the questions I would ask, right, when you're thinking about this. So what problem are you trying to solve? Why is this a problem in your product team, right? How do you want to do it, right? So, these are just very common questions if you're thinking about growing your product team or changing a product team, or even as a member of a product team. These are things that you may be thinking of, right? But to me, doesn't this sound very familiar, right? These questions are questions that actually product managers ask very often as a product manager, and that's actually how I view scaling a product team. But let's go back. So what does this have to do with scaling a product team? So the objective of a product leader, so me or whoever your product leader is very similar to a product manager, right? And this goes back to the definitions that I was trying to go about. It's very simple, right?
Kevin, sorry to interrupt. I think we are seeing a black bar over the top of your slides. I'm not sure if you're sharing the entire screen or just one app.
Oh, I think it's the Zoom thing. Okay, is it better now? Can you guys see?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So what does this have to do with scaling a product? In my perspective, the objective of a product leader is very similar to a product manager, or actually is the same, right? In the end, regardless if you're a product manager, regardless if you're a researcher, regardless of who your leader is, I actually like to use this definition. So when I ask you guys what product management is, what do product managers do? I use a very simple term and very simple way to describe what a product manager does. So to me, I mean, we can have a discussion about this maybe afterwards, but very simply, a product manager and a product leader, what they do as part of the product organization is to solve the right customer problems, right? And so product leader equals product manager, but we're just managing two different products. So I'll deep dive this in a bit as well. So a product leader's product is actually their product team, at least in my perspective, right? So my team, my product is my product managers, my designers, the researchers, the processes that are in place, whatever, all these things, the topology, all these things is part of is part of my, is part of what I believe the product of a product leader is, right? So whilst the difference is that I'm managing the organization, you guys are managing potentially a user app, maybe it's a payment or wallet service, onboarding flow, whatever it may be. And when you think about the product team as a product, and I can deep dive a little bit more, is when you think about the product team as a product, what happens is that usually I think about us as a black box, right? So customer problems come in, solutions go out, right?
We
very
still see a few black boxes.
Okay, sorry. Is it
there
gone?
Are two more on the top and on the top right.
Oh, I don't see it on my screen. Okay.
There's still one on the top, I believe. Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I think about the product team as a black box of when customer problems go in, and then the product team takes this, and then out comes the solutions, right? So very similar to Lalamove. Sorry, I just wanted to plug in Lalamove. So immediate delivery need, the product Lalamove or the service, and you get matched with a driver, right? Very similar. And when you think about the product team as a product, then you start thinking about what are the concepts that you need to do when you build a product, and what are the concepts you use when you're building a product team and when you're scaling a product team, right? So I think there is a fundamental difference, and I do want to acknowledge this very early on, is that what is the difference between a product team versus an actual product? And I think and products are built with code, or it depends on whatever your product is. But in this case that we're talking about, products are built with code, whilst product teams are built with people, right? And this is also the foundation to what I believe allows us to scale, or based on the methodology that I think about the product team, is think about teams are built with trust, right? So making sure that you are also aware that product teams are built with people, and in the end, teams are also built with trust. And with this in mind, the things that I will talk about will make a little bit more sense as well. So very similar to building a product, there's actually, I mean, in my perspective, and I always talk about this to my team, is that there is no right way of doing product, right? And this is very similar to scaling a team. So each organization is very different. It's also very under very different circumstances. So if you think about, let's say Hong Kong, the talent pool may be a little bit different as compared to the talent pool in the US. Maybe your company likes allows remote work. That causes how you manage your product team very differently as well. Different languages, different language capabilities. So there's so many different variables when it comes to an organization, that scaling, that there's actually no real right way of doing product. What works for others doesn't mean it worked for you, and it doesn't mean it worked for your organization. So I'm sure you've seen these, right? So we've got the very typical squad framework from Spotify. You've got the press release framework from Amazon, and this is a book that I've been reading. It's the Team Topologies, and this is quite new. And yeah, I mean, there's also a link here just for those who are interested. That you can actually, people can submit their product frameworks, and you can look at all these product frameworks that are available. And the fact that there's so many product frameworks usually means that there's no best one. All right, it's always and it's never the best one. It's always the one that's best for you. Just like building a product, right? So for example, when you're building a product, is there, do you use user stories? Are you using waterfall? Are you using agile? Are you using Scrum? It doesn't really matter that much sometimes, and there's so many circumstances that affect why or the way that you're building your product. So very similar to scaling an organization, is that there's no one single framework that works. There's no one single methodology that works. I think that's very early on. You have to acknowledge this, that this is an ongoing process, and this is also why I make that parallel between managing scaling a product as well as building a product as well. So I think this is what I did when I started scaling my product team, was that it's very simply breaking down the team's biggest problems. So when you think about your team as a product, right? What problems are you facing? How would you prioritize it? How would you solve it? And how do you measure success, right? Very simply, these things. And that's actually again, very similar to what I did when I first took over the team, was, hey, what are my biggest problems leading this Lalamove product team? How do I solve it? How do I prioritize it? And in my mind, I have a backlog of things that I wanted to do, right? So And I think the first example was that maybe some of the people in the call that was part of Lalamove would know is that there was a period of time where we were not really doing product management, and we were doing a lot of project management because we had to get out a very huge project, or this, I guess, a huge project out, and the team was very just focused on project management and less on product management, or maybe more on becoming a business analyst, less on the product management side. And I think one of the biggest things that I felt that we needed to do, and was to solve this problem and get us back to product management, right? So what did I do? Why did I prioritize it? I believe that this was hurting one of the root causes for lower morale. I believe that we needed to get back to product management so that we would be able to move forward as an organization and actually call ourselves a product team, and things like that, right? How would I solve it? Essentially, same thing. How would I solve a problem that a customer is facing, or as for a product would be, I got some people together, some of my closest confidants in the product team. We held a workshop to say, hey, what are the problems? How do we get back to product management? What came out of that was a framework for a process in which that we would bring back to the product team, and we would bring to the management team to say, hey, this is how we want to do our product management. So essentially what we did was we created this process which product managers would have to create 3 documents, or I guess you could call it 3 types of rituals. Number one of the documents we called is called a PDD. This is something that I believe could be Lalamove specific, but it was an outcome of this type of brainstorming, right? So this PDD is what we call a problem definition document. So it allows the product managers to focus on what the problem is, to really understand what problem they're trying to solve, etc. And then we will move forward to the other documents, etc. So when you think about a product team, I started thinking about it more as a product, and these were the questions I asked myself. And I would essentially build a backlog of things that I wanted to do, and these were the things and I would prioritize them based on what I perceived the impact, or whatever the feedback that would have gotten by the team, etc. And I think very similar is that it's very similar to building a product, is that we have to keep iterating. So we have to keep iterating on the team as well. So I have a link here as well, which is it basically talks about the how the Spotify squad framework failed. And so what my message here is more on what worked yesterday doesn't mean it'll work today, and doesn't mean it won't work tomorrow, right? I think we always have to keep iterating on the team. What are the processes? What are the things that we do? What are the type of what is the topology? How do we work with the tech team? Things like that. It's very similar to how I think about building products as well. Is that you can't get, or you won't get product market fit right the first time. And same thing as scaling your product team. Your first framework, or your first org chart, or your first topology will never be your last topology. If it is, either you're doing something that nobody else knows, or you're doing something wrong, because we need to keep evolving. The team keeps scaling. You're adding new people. There'll be more and more variables that come into play. As your team scales, you have different problems, and then you have to keep thinking about improving that, improving the team, improving the processes, whatever it may be. And I think in the end is I acknowledge that there is and there will be no perfect setup or framework, and that you have to always keep moving and keep iterating on that. As part of iteration, I think this goes back to the fact that product teams are built with people. And teams are built with trust, right? So I think this is also something that needs to be established as part of the culture, is a high trust culture, right? In order for us to have this iteration, keep building, or keep making changes to the processes, keep making changes to the organization, keep making changes to the product team, it actually requires a team with high trust. Trust to allow us to keep making that iteration, but trust that also allows us to measure success, get feedback, form a hypothesis, and test. And these are the things that go on in my mind whenever I introduce a new thing to my product team, a new ritual, or remove a ritual, whatever it may be. But it goes back to the fact that when you think about the product team as a product, we need to iterate, we need to keep building and testing and making adjustments. But in the end, the slight difference here is that you need to have that trust within your team. You need to build that trust in order to get that feedback so that your iterations make sense and that your team trusts you to make those iterations, so that the changes within your team don't become a nuance, but it becomes something that they believe will help them become better as well. So another thing that very similar to a product team and a product is aligning a direction, right? So there are many different stages of a product organization. When you're just getting started, the goal of the product team is just experimenting, trying to find out. I think there's a question. Okay, I'll probably try to answer these questions afterwards. But yes, so back to this part. So stages of the product organization. So when you're just getting started, you're trying to figure out, you're experimenting with different ideas. So there is less of a direction. There's less of a North Star. And then once you hit that product market fit, then you're at a different place in the organization. But when you're scaling, what is very, very important is that you create a vision and then you reinforce it, right? And you also have to create a vision or align the direction of the product within different time horizons. So for example, a quarterly time horizon, a yearly time horizon, and of course the vision, which will be your North Star, which is your 5-year time horizon. And I think what's key, I mean, this is probably self-explanatory. I mean, having a vision is very common, but at the same time, as the team scales, often or not, the vision is lost. Often or not, when you're at that period of time from product market fit to scale, sometimes the team forgets about the vision. Sometimes the team will forget about it, even when you're scaling the organization. So it's very key to always reinforce this message to the organization, and that's also being part of scaling it. And I think another key thing is don't be afraid to change it. When you're scaling the organization, things change, right? The environment changes, the potentially product market fit changes, your ambition changes as well. So don't be afraid to change it. It doesn't have to be, your North Star doesn't. You have to wait. You don't have to wait 5 years until you change it. But instead, potentially, you can change it whenever you believe that the ambitions change, or things like the product market fit changes, or whatever it may be. So don't be afraid to change it, but communicate it and reinforce this messaging towards the team as we go. Besides also having a vision, I think another key piece is your product team needs a vision as well, or else we're just pointing at each. Hey, we're all product managers. But as a team, we also need to have a goal in mind, right? What is your dream team? What do we want to become as a team? How do we want to become as a team? So I think one of the key things that I established very early on in the team is, what do I want the team to become and evolve into, right? Setting that expectation of, let's say, 5 years, we want to become a world-class product team. What does it mean to become a world-class product team? What do we need to do to become a world-class product team? This sets your team for a vision and alignment in terms of what do they believe they want to grow towards, and what do they believe that the team can grow towards as well. So this takes time, this takes effort, but at the same time, it's the same methodology that you would do you would use when you're forming a product vision as well. But instead of forming it for your product, but you form it for your team. And one of the key ways that I did it was basically establish a principles, right? And the reason why we also need to establish principles is everybody does product management a little differently. Everybody has their own ways of doing product management. And especially if you're coming from different companies, different types of backgrounds, product management is something that can vary across the board. And basically, you set out principles to ensure quality and consistency within your organization is also very key. This is actually very, very similar to when you're building a product as well. You also want to set out, what are those, let's say, for example, if you're a designer, what are those principles that when you're designing the product? What are those things that you keep in mind when you're designing the product? Very similar to here is that we need to create those principles for those product managers. So basically create expectations on what the product manager should do. And this will then actually influence topology as well. So define and reinforce what it means to be a person in your product team. And actually, for our case in Lalamove, we have 4 key principles in mind. And this is also what we believe is our vision to become a world-class product team, which is building with speed, so that we can iterate, test, iterate, and create value, learn, create value, build with quality, so that when I'm talking about quality, it's about listening to our customers, understanding our customers, being able to understand what the customers want and empathize with them. And there's delivery and discovery, which is also part of the principles in Lalamove product team, which is we have to deliver now so that we can keep the business moving forward. But at the same time, we have to discover for the future so that we can delight our customers as well. So so essentially, by forming a product team vision, you then will have to think about principles in place that will allow us to maintain this quality and consistency within the product management team, so that we're aligned in terms of how we want to do product management. And as a result, we'll be able to then influence the topology, meaning how we work with the tech team, or how does the org structure, look in the product team as well. I think this is my second last slide. I think in the end, we actually have to remind ourselves that a team is built with people, right? And this is the very, very statement that I talked about very early on. And with that in mind, I also think about this analogy often, is that professional sports team needs coaches and training to get better, right? So why this logic should apply to product managers as well, and actually not just product management, but within the organization as well. And the how I reflect or mirror this towards why this is very similar to product management is very similar to code refactoring. The product needs to improve, the code needs to improve as well. So does the people within the product team. So what we did do here in Lalamove was essentially create and establish a career framework so that we can establish a baseline in terms of what the product manager, what we expect product managers in different levels to do, and how they can grow as part of the product management team. Part of this is setting out the key competencies that we believe product managers should be doing or should have. And this also kind of dictates what type of product organization you are. So for example, in Lalamove, we believe execution is a very important piece of product management. We believe empathy and discovery is important, strategy and planning, and most importantly, leadership and development. So team is built with people, so we have to establish this type of framework as a baseline, but also establish coaching as a fundamental part of being a leader. So if you look the bottom here, one of the key competencies that I talk about is leadership and development. And one of the things that almost across all the levels of product management is coaching, more coaching, even more coaching, and coach everyone. So keep in mind that teams, no matter if it's a product team or whatever team it will be, they're built with people. And if they're built with people, coaching and training is a fundamental piece that allows us to grow as a team as well. So that's how I would think about product teams. I think in general, I would break down the scaling a product team in a few things, right? So there's no right way of scaling a product team, very similar to there's no right way of building a product. You also need to acknowledge that continuous iteration is part of scaling. And that's why, for example, whenever someone asks me, when do I start scaling my product team? And my answer is every single day, because you don't just suddenly scale your product team. If you suddenly scale your product team, you're too late. It's too late. You always have to think about scaling it on a continuous basis. Think about what's the next thing. Think about how to improve. And when a new person joins, or when you have a few more people join, or when you have different things, maybe, I don't know, the company strategy changes, whatever it may be, you are there to react fast enough so that your team can scale accordingly as well. Another piece of core part of scaling a product team is to ensure that you align the purpose of for your product. So building a vision within different time horizons as well. So making sure that it's yearly, quarterly, and also, of course, the 5-year vision as well. And when you think about your product as a product team, don't forget to set a vision for your team as well, right? So think about your team. What does your dream team look like? What are those principles, and why are those principles there? So to allow you to become that dream team of yours, etc. Right? And in the end, keep growing, etc. Right? And keep growing the team, keep developing your team, just like how you would always keep growing your product, keep developing your product, keep refactoring code, whatever it may be. And that's how I think about building a product team and scaling a product team. And that's why it matters to product managers, because to me, building a product team is very similar to building a product. It's just that the product is slightly different. My product is the organization. Your product could be, a user app, a driver app, whatever it may be. And that's why I still call myself a product manager, because to me, I'm still a product manager. It's just that I manage, the product I manage is my product organization. And I use very similar ideas and frameworks when I build products to scaling a product team. And that's why this matters to product managers as well. So I think we have some questions as well. So I think that's really it for me. So now it's Q&A. I'll open up the chat to see what are the questions. So I think there's one from Karen.
I think there are a couple ones from Karen.
Oh, there are a couple ones from Karen. Okay.
Oh, Karen, you want to ask personally?
Hi, yeah, sure. I would, my first question, and sorry, I don't mean to take up the questions, is can you talk a little bit about the differences between a product manager and a technical product manager? How do you see the differences?
Yeah, I don't really see the differences, and I don't like to see the differences as well. I think that's why when I talk about, I think the differences it may be like in terms of your specialty, but to me, that's why when I talked about what a product manager is and what do we do very early on in the sorry, let me go back, is this, right? And that's why I don't really feel that there are differences. And in the end, regardless who you are, where you are, as long as you're a part of the product organization, or if you call yourself a product manager, ultimately you do one thing, right? And that needs to be on the top of mind whenever you're a product manager, regardless if you're a technical product manager, if you're a there's some, I guess, business product managers, and if there are other, I guess, design oriented product managers. To me, ultimately, they need to care about one thing. It doesn't matter how they get there, but most importantly is solving the right customer problems. And that's why, to me, it doesn't matter in terms of whether or not they're a technical product manager or if they're, a product manager or even, for example, a product leader itself. Ultimately, we do the same thing. I don't like to complicate things. And to me, all in all, it's about understanding and solving the right customer problems, regardless of if you're a technical product manager or not. Yeah.
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you also had another question on trust. So how do we build trust quickly with diverse teams?
I'll let somebody else ask a question first. I don't want to hog up the question. So thank you.
Sure. So I think there was another one from Brian. So what is your view on hiring when you scale your team at Lalamove? How do you find candidates to join your team? So
thanks, Kevin. A bit background is that we're trying to scale our team at Bowtie also. But one of the biggest questions or problems that we face is it's difficult to find the right persons for the role. For example, like us, we want someone who has experience in product management and also a knowledge in insurance. But it's kind of difficult to find these people. I'm not sure whether, like in Lalamove, for example, you may want someone who has experience in logistics and also product management. So how do you feel like when you're scaling, how do you find the people and what's your feel in general?
Yeah, I have a very different point of view. I think in terms of, I guess, the industry piece. So I think quick answer to that, having the industry experience, I don't, I would say I don't find that very important when hiring product managers. I find that I know that I like to go back to here, but it's very simple to me. Being, if you find the right product manager, it's a product manager that knows what they're doing and knows that ultimately what a product manager needs to do, which is, again, to solve customer problems, right? So when I think about, whether or not they have logistics experience, whether or not, even sometimes if they don't even have logistics experience, or if they don't even have product management experience, we also hire them as part of our product operations program or product associate program. So that's something that we definitely do have. And I think it all comes down to my idea that in the end, product managers do one single thing: solve the right customer problems, regardless of whatever industry they are in, whatever company they are in, right? So if you find a true product, a good product manager, it's the ones that knows how to solve problems, right? So it doesn't matter if they have more in-depth knowledge in terms of logistics or insurance. What matters is that they know how to get to where the problem is, find the root cause, ask the right questions, care about the customer, to the point that they are able to solve these problems. And the industry knowledge, such as insurance, all that's something that you can learn quite easily. But I think having the awareness to understand what is a customer problem, speaking a customer language, empathizing with the customer, I think that's the most difficult part in hiring product managers instead of the industry piece. And sometimes it's about also expanding your search away from just product managers, especially in Hong Kong, right? So that's also linking back to here is that, sorry, each organization is different and it's under different circumstances, and that's why scaling an organization there's no one way. But my point of view is that the industry expertise doesn't matter as much. Product management expertise may not matter as much as well, as long as they're speaking the right language and they understand that in the end, what a product manager needs to do, and which is, again, solving the right customer problems. But yes, we do find it is quite hard to find product managers, and that's why we're actually quite lucky in terms of Lalamove that we do try to look outside of Hong Kong. We are quite a diverse team. We do have product managers across the world. that come to Hong Kong from the States, from India, from Brazil, etc. And we're willing to do so because we do care that finding the right people is important. And that's why we do spend a lot of time trying to find the right product manager for our role. And we usually look into whether or not they have that product mindset whenever they are trying to interview with us.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So maybe I ask a question too. Just want to learn about your view on hiring contractors. Do you think, for example, when a product team needs a particular skills for particular product or project, do you think it's good to hire contractors, or what are the pros and cons? And yeah, so what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it's always, I always think about this more on very similar to what I talked about. Like it really depends on your organization. You know, you have to do whatever works for your organization. And if, let's say, for example, if you don't have the resources or you can't find a right person at that moment, hiring a contractor to me is completely fine, right? But I think, but in the end, it's if you have to find the right contractor as well, right? I think that's a key piece. It doesn't matter if they're a contractor. It doesn't matter if they are a freelancer. Even doesn't matter if they're part-time, right? But as long as you are finding the right person that believes in, let's say, the principles that you've laid out as part of your product team, it doesn't really matter to me. To me, there's no real pros and cons because I can't evaluate that, because if you think about things a little bit more practically, there's so many factors within an organization that you can or cannot control, right? For example, budget, for example, the talent pool, right? So if you have to find a contractor, then it doesn't matter, but you just need to find the right one that suits the culture, has that high trust within your team, so that you can keep iterating and have them go along with the scaling process of the product team as well.
So what are your tips of making sure the new hires are actually matching the culture of your company?
Yeah, so I think making sure that we have a very strenuous interview process, I would say. I think that's very key to finding the right person. So number one, we interview them with a case. So that's more of whether or not they're in terms of the logic, if they think the way that we want them to think. And then we have product manager interviews with them, so to see if there's a fit in terms of whether or not let's say their personality, how they think. But at the same time, I usually one of the key things that I usually ask during the interview process, which actually I'm the last part, and usually when I'm in the last part, I evaluate culture fit often. I believe in my team that they will be evaluating the skills part, and I usually evaluate the culture part. And one of the things that I usually ask is I want them to, number one, evaluate how they did during the interview process. So right after the interview, I actually asked them, how do you think you did, right? And then actually through that process, you can actually start really looking into what that person's personality is, because you can tell if he's humble, it tells if he reflects, you can tell a lot of these things that we care about in Lalamove. So it's an interesting interview technique. I don't see many people do it, but to me, it's very important because it actually shows, and also, I guess a lot of interviewers don't prepare for a reflection within the interview process. So that's where you also see the true self during the interview process. So that's what I usually do.
Thanks.
So I'll be cheeky on that and ask the flip side. So if you think about the reflection from an interviewee, but what about the interviewer? If I ask how do you think it went to the interviewer, how would that go?
No, I think it goes both ways, right? I think it goes both ways. I think like I would also say, hey, I think regardless, so, you know, even when I'm doing interviews, and maybe some of the times, I don't know, but the questions I ask may not be that, you know, good. They may not be that clear, whatever it may be. I think it goes both ways. Yeah. So usually I say, you know, what do you think about you know, the org, or do you want to know a little bit more about me or things? So I try to keep it a two-way conversation as much as I can. I think there's another question from Chris. So you said PM consists of technical, business, UX. Do they all report to you, or are they business people nominated from the sales and business teams? How the reporting line work in my case? So essentially, we do have a very, I guess, a little bit more traditional product management structure. We have the product management team, which consists of product managers. And then we've got, so what they do is essentially they work with our business stakeholders, they work with our customers, they work with whoever we need to formulate a problem and work with them to then also solve the problems that we need to solve. So the business, I would say business teams don't report to me. We liaise with them, we work with them, we collaborate them to identify what the customer problems are and how can we best solve them. And in terms of, yes, so UX does report to me. We don't really have technical product managers because I don't believe that we need to have technical product managers at this stage. But we do have product managers who are a little bit more specialized in the technical piece. For example, I think Ho Ming is in this call right now. That Ho Ming is one of our little bit more technical product managers, and he worked with, who works with our API product as well. But yeah, so basically we have a layer of product leaders, and then underneath we have the product managers, designers, researchers, and that's how our product organization is organized.
So are there any more questions?
Hey, I want to ask one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I think like in your slides you mentioned like there is time when you discover that the process no longer works. Is there any like example you can share with us, like what kind of like symptoms or data that you see from your like operational workflow, and based on that observation, what kind of change you bring to the organization and the workflow?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's actually something that I implemented quite recently. So one of the, as we scale, I think one of the problems that we faced was that we lacked focus in the team, right? More and more when we scale, let's say, for example, from 10 to 40, telling 10 product managers that this is what we need to do is very easy. But telling 40 product managers this is what we do is very difficult. And as a result, I think this was caught a little bit later, but it was caught as in the results of the products that we were building. So what we noticed is that a lot of our secondary matrix, so we usually have primary and secondary success metrics, right? So primary is the North Star that we want to move. Secondary, probably more product related that will potentially move the primary metrics. We did very well in moving the secondary matrix, meaning that, for example, conversion from registration was very high on certain pages, and we were able to improve that. But number of place orders did not increase or did not drastically increase as a result as well, right? So we were able to move these secondary matrix very well, but primary matrix we didn't. And I think, and we saw that kind of across the organization as well. So we were doing a good job in tracking, we were doing a good job in iterating, but we weren't making substantial changes to these primary metrics, right? And my hypothesis was that we didn't bring enough focus to the team. We didn't bring enough focus so that we were making sure that we were when you move secondary matrix, you have to move multiple or a vast amount of secondary matrix in order for you to really move a primary matrix. And so the hypothesis I had, very similar to what you would have in the product manager as a product manager for a product, was that for me, the hypothesis was that we needed to bring a little bit more focus to the team, so that we would be able to move those abundance of secondary matrix, so that then we can move that primary matrix. So what we did now and what we're continuously evolving is how we do our product planning. So quarterly, for example, this year, one of the initiatives that I had for the product team is that we would have very goal-oriented and focused objectives for the product team, and we won't have let's say, I don't know, 20 objectives, because that would be meaningless. We would have a very few objectives, and we would try to really make changes, move the needle with those objectives. And I think right now, I think it's our first quarter doing this, and I continue to believe that this is the way that we need to, unless the metrics that I see prove me otherwise.
Thanks.
So what are the usual challenges when you scale up your team? Like, do you find some of the original team members are not getting used to the new way of working, or sometimes the new hires have difficult times to adjust to the way that you're working? Things like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think both often happen. I think especially if you have a lot of founding members in the team, they're used to a certain set of way of doing product management, and when you scale, things change, right? But it all comes down to establishing trust with that team, right? Establishing that repertoire with that person, and respecting also the fact that he's been with the company, or he or she has been with the company for a while, right? So I think oftentimes when you scale a product team, there may be some people who are left over from the, I guess, lack of a better word, older generation or the previous generation. But at the same time, there's a lot that they can still bring to the table. And it's about respecting that and also earning their trust, so that they can they can go with and go along with the changes that you need to do within the product organization. And very similar, and for new joiners, I think it's a little bit easier for new joiners. There's a certain expectation when they do join the product team, but it's more about pairing them with the right people, so that they get assimilated in the team quickly rather than anything else. Yeah. But I think in one word, it's really about establishing trust within the organization, establishing trust in the team.
See. So I think Karen had another question about trust, right?
Yes. So basically, how do you build trust quickly with a diverse teams and make sure they're inclusive practices instead of sidelining them with divergent viewpoints? This is a very tough one. I think it often happens, right? So usually product managers are. I'm a little bit biased, but we're a little bit we like to think a lot, right? So it's normal for us to question things. It's good, in fact, right? It's just part of the product management process, right? You always ask why. All right. And I think building trust is difficult, but it really, what you really need to do is help them understand that you're doing this for the right reasons. Or as a leader, right? Establishing trust means that you have them aware, or you make them aware that you care about the organization, you care about them as a person and as an individual. So even if they do have divergent viewpoints, you do listen to them. But at the same time, you do have to have that standpoint where the organization is an organization, and you may have your own viewpoints, but as an organization, we do have a specific strategy that we do believe can move forward with. And I think this is something that I do dearly believe in, is that I think it's basically disagree and commit, Yeah, so that's one of the things that I do believe in, which is you can disagree, and I'm very happy for you to disagree. And as a leader, if you disagree, I'm even happier, and I'm here to listen to that. But you know, as an organization, we have organizational goals. We have to commit, and that's being part of the organization. And unfortunately, if those can't agree, or those who disagree but can't commit, to be honest, I'd rather them move on, because they wouldn't be able to, work within this organization. And that's just part of being committed in an organization as well.
Speaking of that, you would rather have those that are unfit to move on. Are there any situations that you encounter that you have to scale down your team rather than scale up your team?
I think I would. I wouldn't say we scaled down, but we did. There, of course, there are situations that we would have to let go of people for the right circumstances. And I think in the end, it's always about having, number one. Again, it goes back to what I believe. The foundation of a team is trust. So as long as the trust is broken from both sides, if he doesn't trust you, you don't trust him. It makes it very difficult for the organization to scale and grow. And when a relationship comes to that point, that's when I think both sides need to acknowledge that, hey, we don't have the trust to move on, and that's where we need to scale down. Yeah, and it has definitely happened. Yeah.
That's another question directly to me, actually. Is there such a thing as scaling up too fast? How could you tell it becomes a problem?
Yeah, I mean, there will always be scaling up too fast, and that's why you think about it as a product, right? And that's why it's about continuous improvement and not about scaling. I think that's why I don't like to say, oh, we're now at 50 people, it's time to scale, it's too late. Oh, we're now at 12 people, it's time to scale, or it's too late. No, so you should never get to that point, right? It's always about thinking about what's next, thinking about how to improve, thinking about what are the things that we can do better each day, each time, and continuously improve upon that. So you will never get to the point that, we're scaled too fast, because you will keep iterating on the process so that you wouldn't get to that point. And I think that's why it's important to have that mentality. And I'll be honest, I think my team, we did scale very, very quickly. But I think the fact that we had high trust, and the fact that we kept continuously improving the processes, continuously improving how the organization is structured, and having the team believe that this is the right way to do things, that allows us to, regardless if we're scaling too fast, it allows us to get to the point where we need to as well. But I think it's about being aware that scaling or even building a product, it's always about iteration. It's always about continuously improving, and so that you don't get to the point where you're like, oh, it's too late, or oh, this problem is too big of a problem, or oh, the competitor has already done something that's better than us, right? So it's always just about continuous iteration.
I see. Thanks. So any more questions from the group?
I can go. Hey, Kevin, thank you so much for everything you shared so far. You mentioned, I think at some point, that you were a self-taught product manager. Are there any kind of resources that you found particularly influential or formative that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think I actually think like Mind the Product has great not to like toot your horn, but like definitely Mind the Product has great videos. I think for me I think that it's always the same, right? Like just be aware that there's no right way of building a product. I think that's very key. Something that works in place A doesn't mean it'll work in point B. But at the same time, what you need to do is really listen and talk to a lot of people. I actually love going on YouTube and looking at these talks, because even me as a product leader right now, I still believe that there's a lot for me to learn. I get a lot of information from a lot of, from insights from a lot of what they talk about, but it's about, forming your own methodology on what is building your, what does building a product mean, right? I don't think anybody, I haven't heard of, anybody saying, product managers are, the definition of a product manager is solving customer problems. Something as simple as that, right? But that's something that I came up with, and I solely do believe in, and that's part of the product management process, is also acknowledging that there is no right product management process. So it's okay to, form your own type of ideals. But I think the best way to do it is just, speak to a lot of people, go on, Mind the Product or other product communities, watch those videos, really get insights from this, and it actually helps a lot.
Thank you.
So, any more questions?
I have a second question if we have time. You talked a lot about kind of continuous iteration and improvement delivery. And at least in my current workplace, like I feel like the product and technical sides of the business are really aligned on that, but sometimes it's very challenging to get commercial sides of the business aligned with that, because they plan much further ahead and have different kind of priorities. Has that ever been a challenge for you? And how to, I guess, how would you recommend getting that alignment at kind of leadership levels?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that all companies will face. I think Lalamove faces it day to day. I think it's very simple. But unfortunately, I don't know how your organization is structured. But it's really about making sure that we're both product and the company are aligned on certain things in terms of certain focuses, right? That's what essentially needs to be done. It can be done on the product side. It can be product led. It can be organization led. It can be business led. But I think in general, it's about making sure that there is the right, not right focus. There is focus, because in the end, if you are, if commercial is thinking A and if you're thinking B, you can never get anywhere. And I mean, it can be done on the product side. It can be led by the product side. But I think in the end, it's really about pulling people together in one room and making sure that they know or they agree that this is the focus that we want to achieve. And, that's what we do essentially, right? We do have organization focus, but at the same time, we do in the end also, pull people in a room and say, hey, what are you guys thinking about? But I think I'd like to segue into, the one piece is that don't be afraid that, businesses or the commercial side has a different point of view. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes if they do, I think as a role of the product manager, it's about helping them understand what are the customer problems, right? But at the same time, how I would put it often is, sometimes the commercial side speaks in a different language, and that's probably why you assume, or maybe you're assuming that you guys are you guys have conflicting in terms of alignment, right? But for example, a lot of times I would assume that the problems you're facing is that the commercial side are asking you to build product A, product B, product C, or feature A, product, feature B, feature C. But ultimately, that's just the way that they communicate, because they're not trained as product managers, right? So what your goal as a product manager is to help translate that into a customer problem. So help them understand, hey, I'm talking about solution A, or I'm requesting solution A. What does that, and you as a product manager is more, hey, what does that actually mean, right? What are you trying to solve? And then in the end, and that's why, to me, like in the end, it goes back to one single thing, which is solving the right customer problems, which is that you as a product manager need to help translate his language of features into customer problems. And often or not, if you're a good product manager, right, you're actually able to figure out, hey, you know, what they're actually concerned about, and when you start to empathize with them, understand, hey, oh, actually these things actually make sense, and that actually give you a different point of view. Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I moved on a little bit, but yeah, that's how I would perceive it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the skill that every of us would need to acquire, because to understand the real problems that the business or our users are encountering are extremely important. It's not about just taking orders from stakeholders, but it's more about digesting what they actually mean, and have discussions with them, and also think about whether there are even better ways to resolve their problems. So maybe they will appreciate your efforts after doing that.
Yeah, and then just to echo on that is some people say product managers need to own the product, need to drive the product direction. I have a different view on that, because that's why I keep going back, is that we're there to solve the right customer problems. And when you think about that, right, it doesn't matter how you get there. So it might be that the stakeholders have good ideas, right? Don't be afraid of that either, right? They might have good ideas, they might have good point of views. It's just how, as a product manager, how do you enable him to think, or he or she to think about these things in a way that then can help you solve the problem, right? So that's the perspective I would like to give you guys.
Sorry, I'm not sure if this question has been raised because I was slightly distracted earlier. Sorry, but I'm curious. How do you know if you're solving the right customer problem?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think in the end, if you're solving what the right really means, in my perspective, usually it's about the organization goals, right? I think we also have to be honest to us. If we're part of the organization, there are always organizational goals, and that leads us to what the strategy is, and that leads us to the problems that we need to solve. And in terms of that's what I mean by right. And there's no best right. It's really about making sure that we're solving the problems that solve customers' problems, but at the same time are aligned with the organization direction, which is the right part of the statement. But yeah, I mean there are other ways. That there's also impact assessment and all that stuff. But I mean, to me, it's really about what the organization goals are as well, and making sure that you're solving those problems, and you're breaking it down into customer level problems, so that you're solving whatever that you need to solve.
Thank you.
Okay, checking on time. One last question, if anyone has it. If not, I do a closing.
Sure.
Okay, let me share my screen again. Hold on a second. Yeah, so everyone can see my screen. So yeah, thanks for Kevin to share a lot of great insights of how he managed to scale the team, and what are the great tips for us, and answer a lot of questions from us. So I hope you have enjoyed the session, and we are product meetups for product managers by product managers, right? So if you enjoy sessions like tonight's, feel free to come up and suggest any topics that you're interested. we are constantly looking for speakers and venues. Once all the restrictive measures are loosened, we can actually have physical meetups. So we need venues as well. And obviously, we need more volunteers to help organize meetups. So you can actually follow our social media channels. We are on Meetup, obviously, but we also have a Facebook group, Twitter account, and LinkedIn account. So feel free to have some product-related conversations there. And we also announce new meetup news there as well. So we will try to post some product-related news and articles to our social channels as well from now onwards. So keep an eye on those channels. And if you want to have a playback of tonight's session, you can also go to the Mind the Product YouTube channel. So yeah, thanks for attending the session tonight. And again, I really want to thank Kevin for all the great sharing.
Happy to share. My pleasure.
So yeah, from now till maybe 9:45, I'll open up the floor here. I will stop the recording. So if you need to do some networking or want to chit chat a little bit, feel free to stay. Or otherwise, you can feel free to drop as well.